You think it's scary to see a shark fin slice through the water toward you? Just be thankful you didn't wake up in a world where that fin never appears again. Picture this. One night. No warning. Every shark on Earth is just gone. The next morning, the ocean looks calm. Perfect vacation postcard. Crystal blue and harmless. Kids are splashing. Surfers are relaxed. No one's humming the Jaws theme. It feels safer than it's ever been. And that's the problem. Because while you're busy celebrating fewer deadly shark attacks, the ocean's heart has quietly stopped beating. The top predators that kept everything in check? Vanished. Food webs that took millions of years to build start wobbling in hours, not with explosions and giant waves, with silence. First, the middlemen of the sea notice. Rays, mid-sized sharks, and other predators that used to be prey suddenly have no one hunting them. Their numbers explode. They swarm seagrass meadows, coral reefs, shellfish beds, mowing through life like underwater locusts. You think it's scary to see one shark? Wait until you see a carpet of rays wiping out an entire scallop fishery. This isn't sci-fi. When large sharks crashed off the U.S. East Coast, rays boomed, and bay scallops basically vanished. One missing predator, and an entire human industry went with it. And that's just level 1. Because those herbivorous fish that keep algae off coral, they're getting hammered by these mid-level hunters. Reefs start to choke under slime and seaweed. Seagrass, which nurseries baby fish and locks away carbon, gets shredded. The water is still blue, still Instagram ready, but it's turning into a biological ghost town. Sharks were never just movie monsters. They were the ocean's life support system. Apex regulators. They decide which animals get to overbreed and which sick or weak prey get removed before disease spreads. They drag nutrients across huge distances, connecting reefs, deep sea, and open water. Indirectly, they're tied to the plankton and marine plants that pump out a big chunk of the oxygen you're breathing right now. So when sharks disappear, it's not just no more Shark Week. It's fewer fish on your plate, collapsing fisheries for coastal communities, lost dive tourism worth millions, and stressed oceans that struggle to make oxygen and absorb carbon, as if it couldn't get any worse than this. Oh boy, it does. Because in this video, we're breaking down, step by step, the ranked chain reaction of disasters that follows a sharkless ocean. Ecological, economic, even atmospheric. By the end, you're going to see sharks not as the villains of the sea, but as the terrifying guardians you actually need to survive. Luckily for us, they're not extinct. Yet. So let's see what happens if we push them to the edge. So if sharks aren't the villains, what are they? They're the ocean's regulators, the top-level bosses, the things quietly making sure everything else doesn't go completely feral while you're out there posting beach pics. In ecology, we call animals like this apex predators and keystone species. Simple version? They're few in number, but their impact is ridiculous. Pull a pebble out of a wall, nothing happens. Pull the keystone out of an arch, the whole thing collapses on you. Sharks are that stone, except they bite back. Great whites, tiger sharks, hammerheads, reef sharks. These guys sit right at the top of marine food webs. They eat big fish, sick fish, careless fish, even other predators. They scare mid-level hunters into behaving, and they stop certain species from turning into vicious, overgrown lawnmowers that chew through everything in sight. You think it's scary to meet a big shark in open water? Imagine an ocean where nothing is scared of anything. No top predator means mid-level predators like groupers, snappers, and rays start booming. They hammer smaller fish, herbivores, and scavengers that were quietly doing the dirty work. cleaning reefs, eating algae, picking off the weak before disease spreads. That's where trophic cascades come in. Fancy term, deadly reality. You remove a top predator, and the food web doesn't just wobble a bit. It snaps and reorganizes in weird, dangerous ways. One level explodes, the next level crashes, and the effects keep rolling down until you're staring at a reef that looks alive, but is basically a haunted house. And this isn't some sci-fi what if. We've already seen mini shark apocalypses. Along the US East Coast, big sharks were hammered by fishing. Their favorite snacks, cownose rays, exploded in number. Those rays went to town on bay scallops, wiping out shellfish beds and slamming local fisheries. Your seafood dinner? Gone, courtesy of a missing fin. On coral reefs where reef sharks have crashed, mid-level predators spike. They overhunt herbivorous fish. Algae smothers the corals, and the whole reef goes from colorful city to slimy brown suburbia. Just be thankful you didn't invest your entire coastal economy in pristine reef tourism. Right before that happens. Oh boy. And as if it couldn't get any worse than this, losing sharks doesn't just mess with who eats who. It changes how nutrients move, where animals dare to swim, even how carbon gets stored. We're talking ripples that can scale from a single bay to whole coastlines. So here's how we're going to break it down. From local reef chaos to collapsing fisheries to planetary scale impacts, we're counting up the 10 biggest dominoes that fall when sharks disappear. You wouldn't want to come across number 1, because by the time we get there, it's not just the ocean that's in trouble. It's you. It's you. So let's ask the uncomfortable question right now. If sharks vanish, what's the next domino to fall? Your favorite seafood? Your coastal job? Or the air in your lungs? You think it's scary to see a fin in the water. Just be thankful you didn't have to watch an entire food chain snap in real time. Because when apex predators like sharks go extinct, the ocean doesn't politely adjust. It lurches. First, the big hunters disappear. Then, the mid-level predators they used to keep in check explode in number. Sounds fine, until those guys eat everything below them. Picture a reef where sharks are gone. The medium fish they used to bully start running the place like a vicious underwater gang. They hammer the smaller herbivores that normally graze on algae. The algae goes wild, smothering corals, turning a bright, living city into a slimy, brown, concrete jungle. That's not a vacation backdrop. That's a marine foreclosure. We've already seen early versions of this. In parts of the Caribbean and the Pacific, reef shark declines line up with coral reefs that suddenly stop bouncing back from storms and bleaching. In North Carolina, when big coastal sharks dropped, rays multiplied and wiped out bay scallop beds. No sharks, no scallops, no fishery. Whole local economies went from seafood capital to, sorry, closed for business. Now scale that up. Fisheries start to implode as key species crash or vanish. Tourist boats that used to sell shark dives and healthy reef trips are suddenly selling, what exactly? A tour of rocks and murky water? Coastal communities that rely on fish, tourism, and clean beaches get hit from 3 sides at once. Jobs, food, and culture, all taking body blows from a predator that isn't even there anymore. And as if it couldn't get any worse than this, here's where it stops being just an ocean problem. Healthy seas help regulate our climate and pump out a huge share of the oxygen you breathe. Tiny plankton and seagrass meadows lock away carbon and spit out oxygen like microscopic forests. Sharks, by keeping prey balanced and habitats intact, are indirectly guarding those systems. They're not just patrolling reefs. They're, in a roundabout way, patrolling your lungs. You think that sounds dramatic? Oh boy, we're still in the shallow end. Because once you start messing with how the ocean stores carbon, you start tugging at the thermostat and the air supply of the entire planet. In a later section, we're going to hit the most shocking link of all: how losing sharks can sabotage carbon storage and nudge the atmosphere toward a slow-motion disaster movie. And spoiler, we're not just the audience for that one. We're the writers. And if you think that sounds dramatic, look at what's already happening in the water right now. Forget sharks for a second. Let's talk about the B-list villains of the ocean. Jellyfish. You think it's scary to see one jelly drifting near your foot at the beach? Try entire bays turning into living jello. In places like Japan and the Black Sea, jellyfish blooms have clogged power plant intakes, shut down fisheries, and turned once productive waters into stinging soup. These guys thrive in warm, murky, overfished seas. The more we knock out big predators, the more room jellies get to move in, multiply, and sting everything that still dares to swim. Then you've got invasive lionfish in the Atlantic and Caribbean. Beautiful, striped, floating like deadly feather dusters. They're not supposed to be there, but they're vacuuming up baby reef fish like an all-you-can-eat buffet. No local predators recognize them as prey, and in shark-depleted areas, they explode in number, stripping reefs of the small fish that clean algae and keep corals alive. And as if it couldn't get any worse than this, we've also created actual dead zones. Areas in the Gulf of Mexico, the Baltic, and beyond, where fertilizer runoff and warming water trigger huge algal blooms. The algae die, bacteria eat the remains, oxygen gets sucked out, and suddenly you've got vast patches of ocean where almost nothing larger than a worm can breathe. No fish, no crabs, just a low-oxygen graveyard. Oh boy, we already know we can break the sea. We've done it before. Look at the North Atlantic cod collapse. For centuries, cod were so abundant people said you could walk across their backs. Then industrial fishing hammered them. Stocks crashed in the early 1990s. Whole coastal communities lost their livelihoods, and decades later, those populations still haven't fully bounced back. That's what happens when you pull too hard on one thread in a food web. Now here's the twist. A lot of these monsters do best when sharks are gone. Fewer sharks means more mid-level predators eating herbivores, which means more algae on reefs, more stressed systems, and more openings for jellyfish, lionfish, and low-oxygen slime worlds to take over. Sharks are like the bouncers at the door, keeping the most vicious troublemakers from overrunning the club. Luckily for us, they're still out there, patrolling, culling the weak, and holding the line. So what happens when we fire the bouncers? What happens when we pull that last safety pin, yank sharks out of the picture, and let everything else explode across our coasts and fisheries? In the next section, we're going to watch that chain reaction play out, step by step. Texas architects, how they quietly design the ocean. You think it's scary to bump into a shark in deep water? The truth is way creepier. They're already in your head before you ever see a fin. Sharks don't just hunt bodies, they rearrange minds, and that mental pressure quietly redraws the entire ocean. Picture a seagrass meadow in the shallows. Turtles, dugongs, and big schools of grazing fish would love to turn it into an all-you-can-eat salad bar. But there's a catch. Out past the edge, a tiger shark cruises. He doesn't have to attack every 5 minutes. He just has to be there. That single deadly shadow carves invisible no-go zones across the seafloor, places where prey refuse to linger because the risk feels way too high. So instead of parking in one cozy corner and mowing it down to bare sand, those grazers keep moving. In, snack, retreat. Shift over, nibble, retreat. Sharks are basically running a strict no loitering policy on the buffet line. The result? Patchy, uneven lawns of seagrass, full of hiding spots, nursery pockets, and safe corridors for baby fish, crabs, and shellfish that will feed everything else later. Coral reefs work the same way. Reef sharks patrol the outer slopes, and suddenly parrotfish and other herbivores stop camping out in one fragile patch. They spread their bites, clip algae here, scrape a little there, then dash back to cover. That constant threat of predation keeps them from overgrazing, which gives corals room to grow, spawn, and build the three-dimensional cities that shelter thousands of species. No sharks, no zoning laws, just a demolition crew with fins. Ecologists call this whole thing a landscape of fear. Sounds dramatic, but it's literally the map inside a prey animal's brain, drawn by where sharks might strike. Every time a shark glides past, that mental map updates. Safe lane, danger corner, do not cross. It keeps ecosystems patchy, messy, and weirdly resilient instead of stripped bare like a biological parking lot. Now yank sharks out. The fear dial drops. Turtles relax. Rays relax. Big fish stop hugging the shadows and start sprawling into every quiet bay and meadow. They graze longer, dig deeper, and hammer the same spots day after day because nothing chases them off. Just be thankful you didn't have to watch that happen in fast forward. At first, it looks fine. Then the seagrass thins. Coral juveniles fail to settle. Nursery areas shrink, and the next generation of prey and predators never shows up. Oh boy, that's the slow, invisible start of massive habitat collapse. And this isn't theory. In the next section, we're going into real places where that shark-built architecture vanished and entire coastlines unraveled in barely a decade. Trophic Cascades 101. When one shark disappears, thousands follow so. If losing that shark architecture sounds bad, wait till you see what happens when the whole top floor caves in. You think it's scary to bump into a great white on a dive? The real horror movie is what the ocean looks like without him patrolling. Let's build a simple food chain you can actually picture. At the top, you've got sharks and other big apex hunters. They eat the large predators just below them. Groupers, big snappers, jacks. Things you wouldn't want to come across if you were a sardine. Those big predators eat mid-level fish. Mid-level fish hammer the herbivores. And the herbivores? They're the lawn mowers, grazing down algae and seaweed so coral and seagrass can breathe. When sharks are there, that whole tower is tense but balanced. Big predators stay lean, moving, wary. Mid-level hunters don't get too cocky. Herbivores have room to do their job. Algae gets nibbled before it can turn into a slimy green takeover. Now pull the sharks. Just delete them from the top row. What happens? The big predators get a population boom and a personality change. With no one dangerous chasing them, they hang out in the best feeding spots and binge on everything below. It's like firing all the security guards in a giant mall and telling the rowdiest kids, "Have fun." At first, it's just one store getting raided. A few mid-level fish vanish. Then those mid-level fish crash everywhere because the big guys are overfeeding. Herbivores are next. The algae eaters get eaten faster than they can reproduce. Suddenly, the food court is wrecked. The electronics store is stripped, and as if it couldn't get any worse than this, the whole building starts to stink. Underwater, that stink is algae. Without herbivores, algae explodes. It smothers coral, blocks light, and coats seagrass in a fuzzy, choking blanket. Reefs that used to be neon cities turn into brown, slimy graveyards. Seagrass meadows that raised baby fish become flat, rotting carpets. And you're left with clear water over dead neighborhoods. Luckily for us, this isn't just some scary theory I'm making up for drama. Scientists have watched this play out in the Caribbean, the Pacific, the Indian Ocean, along the U.S. East Coast, in Australia. Different species, same script. Remove sharks, the Cascade fires. Keep sharks, the system holds. And we're not just talking about, pretty reef gone. In one place, losing sharks helped trigger a chain reaction so brutal it helped wipe out a fishery people had depended on for generations. Entire families went from full nets to empty boats in a few short years. What happened there? And how did a missing shark sink an industry? Oh boy, that story is next, and it's a lot uglier than a single bite. It happened in a place you'd never call dangerous. Quiet sounds, flat water, little boats. North Carolina's coast. For almost a century, bay scallops were the heartbeat here. Families timed their year around the season. Kids learned to shuck before they could drive. Restaurants bragged about local like it was a badge of honor. You think it's scary when your favorite menu item disappears for a month? Imagine watching an entire fishery vanish almost overnight. For decades, big coastal sharks patrolled these waters. Hammerheads, sandbar sharks, duskies. They weren't just spooky fins in the distance. They were the referees. They kept one particular troublemaker in check, the cownose ray. Rays were prey. Sharks were the enforcers, and the scallops quietly thrived under that uneasy peace. Then we showed up with long lines, nets, and zero patience. Industrial fishing hammered those large sharks up and down the U.S. East Coast. In some spots, their numbers dropped by more than 90% in just a few decades. Take away the apex predators, and you don't just remove a few bites from the system. You rip the brakes out of the entire food web. Cownose rays suddenly got a promotion. No more big sharks chasing them. No more constant pressure. Their population started to surge. And as if it couldn't get any worse than this, these rays have a very particular hobby. They love shellfish. A lot. Picture an underwater lawnmower with wings. That's a cownose ray over a scallop bed. They cruise in massive flocks, flap down to the seafloor, and vacuum up scallops, clams, and oysters like living shop vacs. One ray can chow through pounds of shellfish a day. Multiply that by thousands, then by years. The scallops never stood a chance. Beds that had been harvested carefully for generations were shredded in just a few seasons. Juveniles were eaten before they could grow. Adults before they could spawn. The population wasn't just low, it was functionally extinct in many bays. You could search all day and come back with a bucket that used to fill in minutes. And up top? The fallout was brutal. Boats stayed tied to docks. Processing plants went quiet. People who'd built their lives around a winter scallop paycheck watched it evaporate in a single generation. Coastal towns lost not just income, but identity. Grandparents had stories. Grandkids had empty water. Just be thankful you didn't build your mortgage on a species that disappeared because its bodyguards were taken out. Luckily for us, this was only one regional fishery. A preview. A trailer for the kind of economic and ecological chaos a truly sharkless ocean would unleash. If losing a handful of big sharks helped erase a century-old scallop tradition, what happens when we pull sharks out of entire seas at once? The next cascades won't just hit one town. They'll hit the planet. And the scary part? We're already pushing those dominoes. And the scary part? We're already pushing those dominoes. So let's kick your brain sideways for a second. You think it's scary when a big shark glides out of the blue? What if the real trouble starts when all you see are the cute guys? Sea turtles, eagle rays, dugongs, the ocean's emotional support animals. They look harmless, right? Big dark eyes, soft faces, slow, floaty movements. You root for them in every nature documentary. If there's a shark and a turtle in the same shot, you already picked a side. But in a sharkless ocean, these gentle salad eaters can go full ecological wrecking crew. Picture a shallow bay carpeted in seagrass, this lush underwater lawn swaying in the current. It's a nursery for baby fish, a buffet for manatees and dugongs, and a massive carbon sink quietly locking away CO2. Now remove the dangerous top dogs. No tiger sharks cruising the edge. No big hammerheads sweeping through. At first, it feels peaceful, calm, Instagram perfect. Then the herbivores realize no one's watching. Turtles stop hiding in the thick patches and start mowing straight lines through the meadow. Rays that used to dash between safe zones now linger and dig crater after crater for clams. Dugongs, those slow, blubbery lawnmowers, stop nibbling and start clear-cutting. Without that constant, something might eat me pressure, their numbers climb and their behavior shifts. They graze longer, hit the same spots harder, and they don't give the grass time to recover. Give that a few seasons, and your lush green nursery turns into a patchy mess. Keep going, and you get bare sand, cloudy water, and way fewer fish. The ocean's garden becomes a dust bowl, all because there were too many salad eaters and not enough sharks to make them nervous. Oh boy, this is where our feelings betray us. We cheer when a baby turtle dodges a reef shark. We boo when the shark wins, and we forget that if the shark loses too often, the whole system collapses. Our emotional bias toward the cute species blinds us to the deadly damage they can cause when predator pressure disappears. You wouldn't want to come across a world where we saved every turtle on screen, but accidentally erased the seagrass that keeps entire coasts alive. Luckily for us, sharks don't just control numbers. Their presence, their shadow, their reputation shapes where and how these grazers feed. In the next part, we'll dive into those seagrass meadows and show how fear of sharks alone can protect an entire underwater forest. Sharks and seagrass. You think it's scary to swim over a dark, sharky seafloor? The truth is, it should be way scarier to swim over one with no sharks at all. Because those calm, wavy seagrass meadows under you? They're not just fish salad. They're some of the planet's largest and most powerful carbon farms. Square meter for square meter, seagrass can lock away carbon up to dozens of times faster than many forests on land, burying it deep in the mud for centuries instead of letting it float around in the air you breathe. And who patrols these underwater fields? Tiger sharks. Picture a wide, sunny bay in places like Shark Bay, Australia. Dugongs and green turtles move in to feed, like underwater lawnmowers. But cruising the edges, cutting across the middle, are big tiger sharks, bull sharks, and other apex hunters. You wouldn't want to come across one of these guys if you're a slow, chunky grazer. That constant risk turns the whole meadow into a game of musical chairs. Dugongs and turtles can't park in one patch and mow it to the roots. They have to move, graze a little here, a little there, always watching the shadows. Sharks turn the entire meadow into a rotating buffet instead of a single bare dirt parking lot. Now remove the sharks. Suddenly, the danger level drops. The dugongs linger. The turtles hang out. They hammer the same juicy spots again and again, ripping up roots, not just nibbling leaves. You think it's scary to see a shark fin? Oh boy. Wait till you see what a herd of relaxed, hungry herbivores can do to seagrass when nobody's watching. What's left behind is not that lush green carpet. It's scars, bare sand, eroding channels where waves and currents start to dig deeper because the grass that held everything together is gone. Baby fish lose their hiding places. Juvenile sharks, cod, and countless other prey species lose their nursery grounds. The daycare centers of the ocean just vanish. And this isn't just a local landscaping problem. Less seagrass means less carbon pulled out of the water and locked away. Disturbed seafloor can even burp stored carbon back into the system, turning a carbon sink into a slow, deadly leak. Coasts without thick seagrass beds take the full punch of waves and storms, so beaches erode faster and storm surges reach farther inland. As sea levels rise, those meadows are supposed to be our green speed bumps. Without sharks, the speed bumps get ripped out. Just be thankful you didn't grow up breathing air from a world where every one of these carbon farms was already gone. Because this is just one tile in a much larger climate mosaic where sharks quietly help stabilize the very air above your head. And as if it couldn't get any worse than this, sharks aren't only guarding plants. They're also policing entire fish armies. So what happens to reefs and open oceans when that police force goes extinct? So once that police force goes extinct, reefs and open oceans don't just get rowdy. They start to rot from the inside. Without sharks hammering those mid-level predators, you get population explosions of fish that mow down herbivores or chew straight through the cleanup crew. On coral reefs, that means fewer plant-eating fish, more slimy algae, and corals getting smothered like a city buried in graffiti. In seagrass meadows, lose big sharks and the turtles and dugongs stop tiptoeing. They overgraze, rip up roots, and those underwater lawns turn into patchy, muddy wastelands. You think it's scary to bump into a shark in shallow water? Try swimming over a reef where the hard skeletons are crumbling. The seagrass is gone, and everything looks like an underwater parking lot. No hiding places, no color, barely any prey left for anything larger than your thumb. Here's where it jumps from depressing to dangerous. Coral reefs and seagrass beds are not just pretty backgrounds for nature documentaries. They're some of the most productive habitats the ocean has ever built. They're nurseries for fish, feeding grounds for turtles and birds, and massive engines that help keep coastal waters buzzing with life. When sharks disappear and those engines stall, the whole neighborhood goes dark. And that neighborhood isn't just local. It plugs into the entire planet. Our oceans help regulate global climate, soaking up heat and absorbing huge amounts of the carbon we keep throwing into the sky. On top of that, the ocean is a giant invisible forest, pumping out a big slice of the oxygen that ends up in your lungs every time you take a breath. Scientists estimate that marine plants and microscopic plankton are responsible for a significant chunk of the oxygen in our atmosphere. So if we start knocking out coral, shredding seagrass, and stressing the open ocean by pulling sharks from the top, how long before that invisible forest starts to thin? How long before you feel that mistake in your chest instead of just in the headlines? Luckily for us, sharks don't need to be everywhere to matter. They don't make oxygen themselves, but by keeping prey populations in check, culling the weak, and forcing grazers to move instead of strip mining one spot, they help keep those oxygen-making plankton blooms and plant beds stable and productive. Take the cops off the beat, and the whole life support system gets shaky. Oh boy, if that sounds dramatic, we've barely scratched the surface, because the real plot twist is the chain that runs from a single missing shark, to a missing school of fish, to a missing cloud of plankton, to a very real dent in the air above your head. So how close are we to pushing that chain past its breaking point? And what happens to your next breath if we do? Reefs without teeth. You think it's scary to see a bleached white reef on a nature documentary? That's the PG version. The R-rated cut is what happens when you strip the teeth out of the system and let everything else go wild. A healthy coral reef is basically a city that never sleeps. Corals lay down the skyscrapers, algae is constantly trying to move in like graffiti, and armies of herbivorous fish are the cleanup crew, scraping and mowing every surface. Parrotfish, tangs, surgeonfish. They spend their entire lives eating slime so corals can breathe, grow, and build those neon, fish-packed neighborhoods you love to snorkel over. Now drop sharks into that picture. Reef sharks, hammerheads, big predators cruising the alleys. They're not just there to look dangerous. They keep the mid-level hunters in check. Snappers, groupers, jacks, all the guys that would happily turn your plant-eating cleanup crew into lunch. Sharks harass them, thin them out, and force them to move so they can't park over one spot and vacuum every herbivore off the map. Take the sharks away, and as if it couldn't get any worse than this, the script flips fast. Mid-level predators explode in number. They hammer the herbivores. Grazers crash. Suddenly, there's no one left to mow the lawn, and algae does what algae does best. It spreads. It carpets the corals, blocks their light, steals their space, and smothers them in a slimy brown blanket. Give it a few years, and that postcard reef turns into a low-visibility rubble field, coated in fuzz, with a few sad fish picking over the ruins. This isn't some horror movie pitch. Real-world studies have compared shark-rich reefs to shark-depleted ones, and the difference is brutal. Places like Palau, or parts of the Pacific where reef sharks are still common, are bursting with color, big schools of fish, and living coral gardens. Same water temperature, same ocean, different shark story. Where sharks have been fished down by 80–90%, you get fewer species, more algae, less coral, and way less money. Shark-based tourism alone can be worth millions per reef, while a dead, algae-choked reef? You wouldn't want to come across that on a travel brochure. And once those coral cities collapse, the damage doesn't stay underwater. Reefs are nurseries for countless fish species, including ones you eat. Lose the reef, lose the baby fish. Those jagged coral walls also act like breakwaters, soaking up storm energy before it hits the shore. Flatten them, and coastal towns take the punch instead. Luckily for us, some reefs still have their sharks patrolling the streets. But the more we erase those predators, the closer we get to a world where the brightest, most biodiverse habitats on Earth are just extinct memories. So if losing a few sharks can turn a living reef into a graveyard, what happens when you scale that up to entire coastlines, whole oceans, and the global economy that rides on top of them? So if losing a few sharks can flip a reef from neon city to underwater graveyard, what happens when you put a price tag on that? You think it's scary to swim with a big predator? Wait till you see what your bank account looks like in a sharkless world. Let's hit a place where sharks are worth more alive than most lottery tickets. Palau, the Bahamas, Fiji, French Polynesia. These are shark ecotourism hotspots. In Palau, one single reef shark can bring in hundreds of thousands of dollars across its life. Some estimates push that lifetime value into the millions once you add flights, hotels, dive shops, restaurants, and all the "I survived the sharks" t-shirts you buy on the way out. Now compare that to killing the same shark. One haul of meat and fins, sold once, for a few $100. Maybe 1,000 if it's a big one. That's it. Game over. You traded a living, breathing, money-printing machine for the financial equivalent of a vending machine snack. Oh boy. And it's not just the shark itself. Sharks keep the whole set looking good. Healthy shark populations mean healthy reefs and seagrass meadows. They scare grazers and mid-level predators into constantly moving, so nobody overgrazes one patch or wipes out a single type of fish. That creates those insanely colorful, fish-packed scenes divers pay thousands to see. You're not just paying to see one shark. You're paying to see an entire functioning food web. Those reefs and meadows are like underwater theme parks that never close. Divers, snorkelers, underwater photographers, wildlife nerds who can't stop saying, "Did you see that?" They all pour cash into local economies, boat captains, guides, cooks, gear rental shops, tiny guest houses on remote islands. They're all riding on the dorsal fin of those predators. Now pull the sharks out. The vibe changes fast. Mid-level predators explode, herbivores crash, algae smothers coral, seagrass gets chewed to mud. The water can still look blue and pretty from the surface, but underwater it's a biological ghost town. Tourists notice. They stop coming. Dive boats sit empty. Hotel rooms go dark. And suddenly, that one-time profit from a dead shark doesn't look so smart. And it gets worse, as if it couldn't get any worse than this. With sharks gone, fish stocks shrink or collapse, so the same communities that lost tourism money also lose their catch. That's two income streams gone in one hit: direct cash from visitors and the daily food and jobs from the sea itself. So if one reef, one island, can lose that much when sharks disappear, what happens when you scale that up to entire coastlines, whole nations, the global seafood market, and millions of coastal jobs that depend on predators you wouldn't want to come across in the dark? So take that reef, that island, that one broken economy, and now walk into your local supermarket. You think it's scary to swim with sharks? Try staring down an empty seafood aisle. Picture this. You push your cart around the corner, and the entire tuna section is just gone. No snapper, no scallops. The shellfish bar that used to pile up oysters and mussels, just melting ice and a sad little out-of-stock sign. You're not in some post-apocalyptic movie. You're in a world where sharks did their job, and then we made them extinct. Because sharks aren't just dangerous hunters, they're regulators. They keep those mid-level predators in check. The rays, the smaller sharks, the aggressive bony fish, the ones that love to overeat the very species you like to see on your plate. When sharks are around, those middle guys stay lean, move more, and don't dare turn the buffet into an all-you-can-destroy. Take what happened with bay scallops off the U.S. East Coast. Once sharks were hammered by fishing, their usual prey, cownose rays, exploded in number. The rays rolled in like underwater lawnmowers and wiped out scallop beds that had supported fisheries for generations. Your poor ancestors built entire local economies on those shellfish. Then one missing predator, and boom, gone. Now stretch that story. No sharks patrolling reefs and coasts means mid-level predators surge and hammer juvenile snapper and grouper. Rays and crabs chew through clams and oysters. Squid and fast-breeding fish slam anchovies and sardines that tuna depend on. You don't just lose one species. You get a chain reaction of who ate who that ends with your dinner vanishing. And it doesn't settle into some neat new balance. Oh boy, it swings. Trophic cascades create boom and bust cycles where one year a fish stock explodes. The next year it crashes so hard the boats come back nearly empty. How do you manage a fishery when your main species is either everywhere or nowhere with no warning? You can't set quotas. You can't plan jobs. You can't promise supply. It's seafood roulette. Luckily for us, we still have time before the wheel stops spinning completely. But in a sharkless ocean, the menu shrinks, profits sink, and the whole system gets twitchy and unstable. It's not just less wild, it's less edible, less reliable, and way more risky for anyone who depends on the sea for food. And if that sounds bad, wait until you see what happens when the chaos doesn't stop at seafood counters, but starts rewriting coastlines themselves. So what does that actually look like when the chaos comes ashore? Picture this. You walk into a little harbor town that used to smell like salt, diesel, and fried fish. The kind of place where every other house had nets hanging out front and every kid could tie a bowline before they could ride a bike. Now, the boats are still there, but they're not moving. Paint flaking. Hulls half sunk at their moorings. Lines sagging instead of snapping tight at dawn. The docks creak when you step on them, not because they're busy, but because they're rotting. The big neon fresh catch sign over the pier restaurant? Dark. Inside, the chairs are flipped, the counter's dusty, and the specials board hasn't changed in months because there are no specials. There are barely any fish. You think it's scary to imagine an ocean without sharks? Try being the last captain in a town where the sea just stopped paying out. Here's the thing. A lot of coastal economies run on a double engine: fisheries and tourism. You've got people hauling in scallops, snapper, and shrimp at sunrise, and by noon, tourists are lining up to eat it, dive with turtles, or snap selfies over coral reefs. Both of those money streams only flow when the ecosystem is humming, when sharks are quietly policing the chaos so nothing gets too out of control. Take the sharks away, and those mid-level predators we talked about explode. They chew through herbivores, seagrass meadows crash, reefs get smothered in algae, and suddenly the world-famous dive site looks like someone left the ocean on grayscale. Tour boats stop coming. Dive shops close. Souvenir stands selling shark tooth necklaces are still open, but the sharks and the customers are gone. And when the fisheries crash, it's not just paychecks that vanish. People lose their story. That old guy who could read the weather off the waves better than any app? He's not passing that down. The family that's been working the same grounds for 5 generations? Their kids are moving inland to stack boxes in a warehouse. Your poor ancestors fought to survive in dangerous seas. These folks are watching their entire culture go extinct without a storm in sight. Oh boy. And as if it couldn't get any worse than this, the physical danger starts ramping up too. Those reefs and seagrass beds that sharks help protect aren't just pretty backdrops. They're living breakwaters. When they die off, storm waves hit harder, surge runs farther, and beaches erode faster. That means the next big hurricane doesn't just knock out a few windows. It rips straight through streets, floods those empty restaurants, and eats the shoreline itself. Luckily for us, sharks are one of the hidden shock absorbers between coastal towns and a warming, angrier ocean. But what happens when that buffer fails completely, and the next storm doesn't just test the town? It tests the map? Stay with this, because the way sharks hold back climate chaos is way wilder than you think. You think it's scary watching a hurricane crawl across the weather map toward your city? Just be thankful you didn't have to face those storms with no natural armor at all. Because that armor isn't concrete seawalls or fancy engineering. It's alive. Coral reefs. These things are not just pretty fish hotels. A healthy reef can absorb up to 90% of incoming wave energy, acting like a massive, jagged breakwater that never sends you a bill. When a storm surge charges in, reefs trip the waves, knock them down, and peel off their power long before they crash into beaches, roads, and your front porch. They're the invisible bodyguards between coastal towns and an angry ocean. So where do sharks come in? They're not out there punching waves. they're doing something way sneakier. By hunting the right prey, at the right time, they keep reef and seagrass ecosystems from flipping into chaos. Top-down control. Apex referee. On coral reefs, sharks keep mid-level predators in check. Those mid-level hunters, in turn, leave enough herbivorous fish alive to mow down algae before it smothers corals. No sharks, and those mid-level fish explode in number, hammer the herbivores, and suddenly algae wins. The reef goes from hard, wave-busting architecture to a crumbling, slimy mess. You just traded a stone fortress for wet cardboard. Same story in the shallows. Seagrass meadows might look boring, but they're like underwater rebar. Their roots lock sediments in place, their blades slow water flow, and together they keep sand from being ripped away by currents and storms. Sharks patrol those meadows, keeping big grazers and digging predators moving and nervous. When prey know a shark could show up at any second, they don't sit in one spot and nuke the grass. Take sharks away, and oh boy, everything parks. Rays, turtles, and other grazers settle in, overchew patches of seagrass, rip up the roots, and turn dense meadows into patchy bald spots. Those bare areas erode faster, waves bite deeper into the seabed, and the shoreline starts to unravel grain by grain. Now stack that on top of real-world climate trends. Storms are getting stronger, seas are rising, and more people than ever are crowding right onto the coast like it's not the front row of a very dangerous show. Lose sharks, lose reefs, lose seagrass, and suddenly every hurricane, every king tide, every freak swell hits harder, farther inland, and costs more lives and money. Sharks never signed up to be climate heroes, but they're accidental climate defenders. Take them out, and you don't just trigger ecological collapse, you dial up disaster risk for millions of people. And as if it couldn't get any worse than this, we're already pushing shark populations toward the brink, which means that coastal shield is thinning faster than most of us realize. And as if it couldn't get any worse than this, we've barely talked about one of sharks' strangest jobs. They're not just assassins, they're janitors. You think it's scary to meet a great white in open water? Imagine an ocean with no cleanup crew at all, no one taking out the trash, no one dealing with the bodies. Because out there, things die constantly. Fish, turtles, dolphins, even the largest animals that have ever lived, whales. Picture this. A blue whale dies at the surface and starts to sink. 200 tons of flesh, fat, and bone drifting into the deep like a slow-motion bomb of rot. Before it can turn into a giant, disease-spewing soup, sharks lock on. Scalloped hammerheads, tiger sharks, maybe a great white if you're in the right neighborhood, all homing in from miles away. They hit that carcass like a demolition crew. Huge chunks ripped free, skin and blubber peeled back, clouds of meat and oil exploding into the water. It looks vicious, it looks deadly, but what you're really watching is sanitation at high speed. In hours to days, what could have been a floating biohazard gets broken down and passed along to crabs, worms, bacteria, the whole deep-sea community. And it's not just the big dramatic whale falls. Sharks are constantly picking off dead or dying fish, injured seals, sick turtles, anything that's already half a step toward the grave. They're the ones making sure carcasses don't just sit there, rot, and pump out pathogens. You wouldn't want to come across a reef where nothing cleans up. It'd be like leaving meat out in the sun for a week, then jumping in face first. But here's the darker twist. Sharks don't just eat the dead. They also target the weak, the slow, the obviously sick. That feels cruel to us, but for prey populations, it's free healthcare with very sharp teeth. Animals riddled with parasites, infected with viruses, struggling with wounds, they're way more likely to get caught. Remove them, and you cut down the spread of disease through the herd or school. Take sharks away, and everything flips. More carcasses linger. More sick fish and mammals survive long enough to spread parasites and infections. Bacteria and scavengers still show up, sure, but the process is slower, messier, and way riskier for everything that has to swim through that microbial fog. Luckily for us, most of this horror show happens out of sight. But if sharks went extinct, the ocean would literally get dirtier, cloudier, more unpredictable. Oh boy, you think red tide is bad now? So here's the real question. When you remove the ocean's janitors, what happens to all those recycled nutrients they help move, from whale carcasses to the tiniest plankton? What does a broken cleanup crew do to the largest ecosystem on Earth and to the microscopic life that quietly keeps it all running? So if the cleanup crew is breaking down, who's actually refilling the shelves? Because sharks aren't just the ocean's janitors. They're also its nutrient delivery trucks, running non-stop routes across a world you'll never fully see. Nutrient superhighways. A lot of sharks don't stay in one cozy reef their whole lives. They migrate. Tiger sharks, hammerheads, whale sharks, they'll cruise hundreds, sometimes thousands of miles, from deep blue deserts to coastal nurseries and back again. Every time they move, they're carrying nutrients in their muscles, their blood, their guts. It's like strapping a fertilizer tank to a torpedo and letting it patrol the sea. You think it's scary to bump into a shark on a dive? Imagine all the invisible cargo riding inside him. Iron, nitrogen, phosphorus, all locked up in one very dangerous package. When he feeds in one region and digests in another, those nutrients don't stay put. They get released as waste, tiny drifting particles that plankton absolutely love. And sharks don't just move nutrients sideways, they move them up and down. Deep diving species hunt in darker, colder waters, then rise toward the surface to rest or warm up. Every time they pee, poop, or just shed bits of tissue, they're literally pumping deep ocean nutrients into the sunlit zone. Scientists actually call big marine animals biological pumps for a reason. They're like living elevators, hauling raw materials from the basement to the rooftop garden. Now scale that up over millions of animals, every day, for millions of years. Shark feeding frenzies around a dead whale? That's a nutrient fireworks show. Bits of flesh, blood, and waste raining down and drifting out, seeding plankton blooms in places that would otherwise be biological ghost towns. Plankton grows. Small fish swarm in to feed. Larger fish move in to eat them. And suddenly, you've built an entire food web from the microscopic level up. Just be thankful you didn't have to calculate those nutrient budgets by hand. Oh boy. Lose the sharks, and those invisible highways start to shut down. Fewer long-distance migrations, fewer vertical pumps, fewer nutrient paychecks delivered to poor, blue-water neighborhoods. The ocean might still look fine to you, but productivity can quietly sag. Fewer plankton, fewer bait fish, weaker fisheries, less food pulled out of the water column, and even less oxygen produced for you to breathe. So here's the uncomfortable question. If we keep stripping out these biological pumps, how much does the ocean's output drop before we finally notice? When the engine that powers the largest ecosystem on Earth starts running on fumes, what goes first? The seafood on your plate? Or the invisible oxygen factory keeping your lungs in business? You think it's scary to picture the ocean food chain crashing. That's nothing compared to what happens if the ocean's life support machine starts to stall. Plankton. Not the giant sharks, not the whales, not the stuff you'd post on Instagram. The invisible specks. Tiny drifting plants and microbes that, together, pump out a huge share of the oxygen slipping into our atmosphere every single year. Every second breath you take has a decent chance of being stamped, made in the ocean by plankton you'll never see. And here's the twist. Those microscopic oxygen factories don't run on vibes. They run on nutrients, on mixing currents, on stable layered food webs that keep everything moving. That whole system is quietly wired to big animals, including sharks. Kill the top, and the bottom doesn't just sit there politely. It warps. Sharks help move nutrients around when they hunt, migrate, and even when they die and sink. They keep mid-level predators from exploding into vicious swarms that overgraze the wrong things, or strip out the grazers that stop algae from smothering light. They push prey into different areas, changing where they feed, where they poop, where nutrients get recycled back into the surface waters plankton live in. It's messy, deadly, and exactly what the ocean needs. Now imagine we rip that top layer off, not overnight with some sci-fi snap, but the way we're actually doing it. One fishing line, one fin, one extinct shark population at a time. At first, plankton still bloom. The water still looks blue. Your seafood still shows up. Nothing feels dangerous. But over generations, currents shift a little. Nutrient hotspots fade. Food chains get shorter and choppier. Some regions get clearer, almost eerily pretty, because there's less life in the water column. Less life means fewer nutrients cycling back up. Fewer nutrients mean weaker plankton pulses. Weaker pulses mean slightly less oxygen leaking into the air every year. Who notices a 1% drop in a system the size of the planet? Not you. Not your poor ancestors. Maybe not even your grandkids. It's like turning down the dimmer switch on a stadium light one notch a decade. By the time anyone realizes the glow is fading, the wiring is already cooked. Oh boy, as if it couldn't get any worse than this, that slow decline doesn't stay politely in the ocean. It shows up in fisheries, in dead zones, in climate feedbacks, in the background chemistry of the air you're breathing while you watch this. We can't map every single domino yet, but the outlines are there. Fewer sharks, shakier food webs, altered nutrient flows, stressed plankton, a quieter oxygen engine. Luckily for us, we're going to pull all of this together for you. Because when you connect sharks, dying reefs, vanishing seagrass meadows, and fading plankton into one picture, you get a planetary plot twist you really wouldn't want to come across. And the scariest part? That big reveal is still coming. And speaking of scary plot twists, let's flip the monster script for a second. You think it's scary to swim in the ocean because of sharks? Statistically, you're in way more danger from your commute and a snack run. Each year, sharks kill maybe 5 to 10 people worldwide. Vending machines, they crush more people than that. Cows, falling coconuts, even selfies have a higher body count than the ocean's most famous killers. You're terrified of a fin in the water, but you'll happily buckle up in a 2-ton metal box and fly down the highway at 70 miles an hour. Car accidents kill over 1 million people every year. Sharks are not your main character villain here. They're a jump scare cameo at best. And yet, who do we make the movie about? Sharks. Jaws. Killer sharks. Vicious man-eaters. Just be thankful you didn't grow up with a horror franchise about the real threat. Us. Because when you flip the numbers, the story gets dark fast. While sharks kill a handful of humans, humans kill an estimated 70 to 100 million sharks every single year. That's not a typo. Millions. Every year. It's like taking the largest stadium you've ever seen, filling it with sharks, and wiping it out daily. Overfishing slams them. Long lines and nets hook them as bycatch when they weren't even the target. Shark finning slices off their fins for soup and throws the rest of the body back to sink and suffocate. Coastal development and pollution chew up nurseries and hunting grounds. As if it couldn't get any worse than this, climate change is heating and acidifying the very water they evolved to dominate. The result? In many regions, big shark populations have crashed by 70 to 90% in just a few decades. Not slowly, not gently, just dropped off a cliff. You think it's scary to see one shark on a dive? Marine biologists think it's terrifying to dive a reef that should be full of them and see none. Globally, over 30% of shark and ray species are now threatened with extinction, almost entirely because of us. These animals survived asteroid strikes, ice ages, and the rise and fall of your poor ancestors' civilizations. They outlived the most dangerous extinct monsters we've ever dug up. And yet, one species with boats, nets, and a taste for status symbol soup is pushing them to the edge. Oh boy. The real horror story isn't sharks hunting humans. It's humans hunting sharks so hard we start to unravel the ocean's stability, strand by strand. Because when you erase the top predator, you don't just lose a scary fish. You pull a keystone out of the whole marine Jenga tower. And in the next part, you're going to see what happens when that tower starts to sway. And just when you're picturing sharks as this clean, efficient apex machine, as if it couldn't get any worse than this, let's talk about what we actually do to them. Shark finning. You think it's scary to see a dorsal fin in the water? Try being the shark. In many fisheries, sharks are hauled up, fins sliced off with a few quick cuts, and the rest of the body gets kicked back overboard. No rescue, no mercy. That animal sinks, unable to swim, slowly suffocating or bleeding out on the seafloor. It's like taking the wings off a bird mid-flight and dropping it from the sky, just because you wanted the feathers. So why are we doing this on an industrial scale? One bowl of soup. Shark fin soup became a status symbol in some cultures, a way to show you'd made it. Weddings, banquets, big business deals. You serve the pricey stuff. The fins themselves? Mostly texture. Very little flavor. Very little nutritional value. You're not getting some legendary superfood here. You're getting expensive seafood noodles with a PR team. Oh boy, the tragic irony is brutal. We're dismantling one of the largest pillars of ocean health for a dish a lot of younger people don't even want anymore. Surveys in places where shark fin soup used to be the star of the table are showing shifting attitudes. Many younger diners see it as cruel, outdated, or just not worth the price. Imagine wiping out deadly top predators that have survived mass extinctions, so you can impress guests who'd rather order something else. Luckily for us, the world woke up a bit. Over the last couple of decades, dozens of countries have banned finning at sea, forced boats to land sharks with fins still attached, or outlawed the fin trade entirely. Big campaigns have pushed hotels, airlines, and restaurants to drop shark fin soup from menus. Some major cities have turned it from a flex into a red flag. But you wouldn't want to come across the black market. Illegal fins still move through ports in massive quantities, often mislabeled or slipped through loopholes. Bycatch becomes a magic word. Enforcement is patchy. And while we argue over paperwork, shark populations in some regions have already crashed by more than 90%. So where does that leave us? Are we flirting with a sharkless ocean in your lifetime? In your kids' lifetime? If we keep slicing away at the top of the food chain, how many decades do we actually have before some of these species are functionally extinct in the wild? In the next section, we're going to put numbers on that fear and lay out what the timeline to a sharkless sea really looks like if we don't slam the brakes now. So, are we actually racing toward an ocean with no sharks? Or is that just eco-horror clickbait? You think it's scary to picture a shark's fin in the water? Try picturing a vast, empty blue where the top predator is gone and everything underneath is glitching out. Here's where we are. In some regions, populations of large coastal and oceanic sharks are down more than 90% in just a few decades. Not a gentle decline. A cliff. Globally, over 30% of shark and ray species are now threatened with extinction from fishing, finning, and habitat loss. For a group that has survived asteroid impacts and superpredators like Mosasaurus and Megalodon, getting wrecked by fishing lines and plastic bags is a pretty dark joke. And sharks are built in the worst possible way for a comeback story. Many of the largest, deadliest species don't even reach sexual maturity until they're 10, 15, sometimes 20 years old. Some great whites might take over a decade just to be old enough to have kids. When they finally do, they don't spit out thousands of eggs like a sardine. They have a handful of pups. That slow, careful strategy worked for millions of years when the most dangerous thing you wouldn't want to come across was another apex predator. It doesn't work when humans are pulling them out of the water by the millions every year. So once a shark population crashes, it doesn't bounce. It crawls. Even with perfect protection, you're looking at decades just to rebuild numbers, and that's if we stop hitting them right now. As if it couldn't get any worse than this, we're not exactly giving them a break. Region by region, it's a split-screen story. In places like parts of Australia, the Bahamas, and certain Pacific islands, strong protections and no-take zones are letting reef sharks and even some big pelagic species creep back. Tourism money helps. A living shark can be worth hundreds of thousands of dollars over his lifetime to dive operators. Your poor ancestors hunted big predators. We photograph them. But in other areas, it's still open season. In parts of the Indian Ocean, West Africa, and high seas hotspots, unregulated longlines and illegal finning are shredding populations that were already on life support. Scientists warn that if this keeps up, several species won't need to be fully extinct to vanish from the ecosystem. They'll hit what's called functional extinction in our lifetimes. Technically, a few animals left, but not enough to control prey or keep food webs in line. Luckily for us, this isn't a distant sci-fi apocalypse centuries away. It's a "you might live to see this" scenario. In the next sections, we're going to fast forward into that near-future ocean and ask a brutal question. When the sharks fade out, what exactly breaks first? And how fast does the rest of the sea follow? So let's hit fast forward. You drop off a boat over a tropical reef in 2050. The water is still that postcard blue, warm, clear, inviting. You think it's scary to jump into shark-infested water today? Just be thankful you didn't book a trip to this sharkless one instead. At first glance, it looks fine. Then your eyes adjust. The reef that should be a riot of color is mostly brown and gray. Corals coated in fuzzy green algae like they're wearing moldy sweaters. The soundtrack of a healthy reef, crackling shrimp, busy fish, constant motion, is dialed way down. It's not dead silent, but it's the kind of eerie quiet where you start to realize how loud life used to be. You swim along the slope, waiting for that classic moment where a reef shark glides past, or a big grouper eyes you like a confused bouncer. Nothing. No sleek silhouettes in the blue, no thick-bodied predators patrolling. The largest thing you see is a lonely parrotfish chewing on rock like he's the last customer at an empty buffet. Predator imbalances have turned this reef into a simplified, cheap knockoff of its former self. With sharks gone, mid-level hunters exploded, hammered the remaining prey, then crashed. What's left are the tough, weedy survivors, a few scrappy damselfish guarding algae patches, clouds of tiny, nervous baitfish, and spiky urchins wedged into every crevice. It's a food web that's been run through a shredder and taped back together. Those big cinematic schools of snappers and jacks you see in nature docs. Extinct here. The iconic reef cast, reef sharks, huge groupers, swirling barracuda has vanished from the stage. In their place, gelatinous blobs pulse by, jellyfish, everywhere, drifting like plastic bags that learn to sting. Hardy generalists cruise the rubble, the ecological equivalent of weeds growing through cracks in a parking lot. You surface, climb back on shore, and the human story hits just as hard. The beachfront that once sold shark dives and vibrant reef tours now has shuttered dive shops with faded "Best Shark Encounter Ever" posters peeling in the sun. A few tourists still come for the blue water selfies, but they don't stay long. There's only so many photos you can take of brown coral and jellyfish before you start asking for a refund. Local fishers push off at dawn and come back with half-empty coolers. With sharks gone and the web unraveled, the once productive reef fishery is a slot machine that mostly pays out disappointment. As if it couldn't get any worse than this, storms and heat waves keep hammering what's left, each year bleaching a little more, killing a little more. This isn't some distant sci-fi horror reel, it's a warning label. Keep erasing sharks while climate stress ramps up, and this snapshot becomes the default setting for reefs across the tropics. So the real question is, how did losing one group of predators push an entire world underwater to the brink? And is there any way to pull it back? So the real question is, how did losing one group of predators push an entire world underwater to the brink? And is there any way to pull it back? To see the full damage, you have to leave the reef and climb onto a trawler's deck. Picture this. It's 4 a.m. The open ocean is black, and an industrial fishing fleet is already burning diesel like there's no tomorrow, chasing what's left of the world's prey. Sonar screens flicker, nets drop, engines roar, and come up almost empty. You think it's scary to swim with sharks? Try being a captain in a sharkless ocean, watching your catch shrink every single year. Without sharks at the top, those food webs you just saw unravel don't magically stop at the reef line. They ripple all the way out to the high seas. Mid-level predators spike, then crash. Forage fish boom in weird places, vanish in others. The same species that once showed up like clockwork along migration routes now behave like glitchy software. One year, a region is packed. The next, it's a blue desert. How do you set quotas when the fish don't follow the rules anymore? Governments used to plan seasons years ahead. Now they're revising limits mid-week, praying they're not about to trigger the next deadly collapse. Markets hate that. One surprise crash in a major fish stock, and prices whiplash so hard your grocery store can't even keep labels accurate. And this isn't just some sad story for lonely ports and salty old crews. This hits cities hard. Tokyo's famous tuna auctions? Suddenly a lot more drama than show, with bidding wars over smaller, skinnier fish. New York sushi bars rewriting menus monthly. Lagos, Manila, Jakarta. Coastal megacities where millions rely on fish as their main protein, watching prices climb while quality drops. Just be thankful you didn't have to explain to your grandparents that cheap canned tuna is now a luxury item. As if it couldn't get any worse than this, every time the sea fails, we lean harder on land. More pressure on soy, corn, and livestock. More forests cleared to feed animals that were never supposed to replace wild fish for billions of people. You're not just losing seafood. You're turbocharging climate change and squeezing fresh water and farmland to the breaking point. Without sharks quietly stabilizing those food webs, fisheries management turns into a high-stakes guessing game. Roll the dice wrong, and an entire region's protein supply can vanish in a decade. We're talking billions of people in the blast radius, not a few unlucky tourists. So that sharkless future, it's not just bad for divers and nature documentaries. It's bad for dinner plates from Tokyo to New York, from street markets to five-star hotels. But if losing sharks can scramble the global menu this badly, what does it do to the people whose lives and cultures are built around the sea every single day? For a lot of coastal communities, that sharkless future isn't a documentary plot twist. It's a nightmare. So of course, we do what we always do when nature looks dangerous and messy. We ask, can we just build our way out of this? Artificial reefs, fish hatcheries, even proposals for robotic predators cruising around like metal great whites on patrol. You think it's scary to bump into a shark while you're swimming? Imagine a buzzing torpedo with cameras for eyes deciding you look a little too much like a data point. On paper, it sounds clever. Sink some concrete structures to replace lost habitat. Release factory-raised fish to fix collapsing stocks. Program robotic hunters to chase down species that explode when sharks disappear, like rays that mow through shellfish beds or mid-level predators that hammer reef fish. Problem solved, right? Oh boy. Here's the scale problem. Sharks are running quality control on an ocean that covers more than 360 million square kilometers. Every second, across reefs, open water, and the deep. They're making decisions. Which fish to chase, which sick turtle to finish off, which school of prey to scatter so the weakest get picked off. Millions of interactions, every heartbeat, handled by living, learning animals that evolved for this job over hundreds of millions of years. You really think we're going to swap that out for a few steel reefs and a fleet of underwater Roombas with teeth? Even our best conservation tech today struggles just to watch what's going on. Satellite tags, acoustic receivers, drones, AI that counts fish from blurry video feeds. Most of it is just trying to answer basic questions like, who's here, and what did they eat? We can barely monitor entire food webs, let alone micromanage them. And remember, sharks aren't just hitmen. They're nutrient movers, scavengers, bouncers, and health inspectors rolled into one. A tiger shark cruising a seagrass meadow keeps turtles and dugongs from overgrazing the largest, most productive patches. Reef sharks stop mid-level predators from turning herbivorous fish into an extinct memory, which means algae doesn't smother corals. How do you write code for that kind of flexible, context-dependent behavior across half the planet? Just be thankful you didn't have to be the engineer pitching, so we'll need a few million smart robots with perfect batteries and no glitches. Forever. One software update goes wrong, and your predator fleet turns into the deadliest school of lawnmowers the ocean's ever seen. Luckily for us, there's a brutally simple alternative. Keep the original system online and let sharks do their job for free. But is that actually cheaper and easier than building all this high-tech life support for a broken ocean? Or are we underestimating just how expensive replacing an apex predator really is? So we've just watched the open ocean go from sleek predator highway to the deadliest school of lawnmowers the sea's ever seen. And you think it's scary to swim with sharks now? Wait until you see what happens without them, where you actually get in the water. Quick recap before we leave the deep end. Out in the blue, sharks are the top-down regulators. They keep mid-level predators in check, stop one species from bulldozing the rest, and protect the plankton engines that quietly pump out a huge chunk of your oxygen. They patrol coral reefs so grazers can do their job, guard seagrass meadows from being mowed into oblivion, and even help steer climate by shaping who eats whom in the carbon cycle. Lose them, and the whole offshore system starts wobbling. But now we're heading somewhere that should feel a lot closer to home. Literally. We're leaving the abyss, kicking off the dive fins, and wading into the places you actually touch the ocean. Beaches, bays, coral islands, mangrove-lined lagoons, those shiny coastal cities where the skyline meets the surf. Because that's where a sharkless world stops being a science headline and starts messing with your weekend. Here's the twist. Coastal zones are where shark-driven changes hit hardest and fastest, because this is the collision zone. Everything crashes together here. River runoff, seagrass, reefs, fisheries, cargo ships, cruise ships, beachfront hotels, and you with your sunscreen and inflatable flamingo. When apex predators vanish offshore, the shockwave slams straight into the shallows. Fish communities flip, algae blooms, water quality tanks, and the bill lands on human doorsteps. You think sharks are dangerous for swimmers? Just be thankful you didn't grow up in a world where every bay is an overgrown soup of jellyfish, slime, and disease-carrying pests fattened up because nothing is hunting their predators anymore. Take away coastal sharks and mid-level hunters explode, hammering herbivores that usually keep seaweed and algae trimmed. Reefs get smothered, seagrass dies back, and suddenly the pretty turquoise water outside your hotel is hiding a collapsing life support system. Oh boy, and we're just getting started. In the next stretch, we're talking money, memories, and myths. What happens to beach tourism when the water looks like pea soup, not a postcard? What happens when coral walls that once broke waves crumble and storms start punching straight into coastal neighborhoods that thought they were safe? We'll hit shark diving hotspots that turn into economic ghost towns, sacred cultural stories that lose their central character, and yes, even what surfing looks like when the only fins in the lineup are plastic. Because as if it couldn't get any worse than this, you're about to find out that the scariest coastline isn't the one with fins in the water. It's the one without them. Tourism on life support. When the wild disappears from the water. You think it's scary to see a fin slice the surface on your beach vacation? Wait until there's nothing left to slice it. Because the places you dream about visiting, the ones on every travel poster, are built on sharks doing their dangerous day job. Picture the big hitters. Fiji's shark dives where bull sharks swirl around you like living torpedoes. The Bahamas' crystal lagoons with reef sharks cruising over neon coral. South Africa's cage dives, Mexico's whale shark tours, Maldives' overwater bungalows selling you that sleep above a reef fantasy. All of that depends on one thing: a living, balanced food web with big predators keeping the cast in order. Now pull the sharks out. At first, the brochures still look great. Same blue water, same palm trees, same infinity pool where you pretend you're in a nature documentary. But underwater? The show's been canceled. Without sharks, mid-level predators explode, herbivorous fish crash, algae smothers coral, and those famous reefs go from sci-fi color to brown, broken rubble. Dive time used to mean clouds of fish, surprise shark flybys, and that one turtle photobombing every shot. Now it's 10 minutes of, is this it? Before you're back on the boat. Guides stretch trips, move spots, promise maybe tomorrow, while guests quietly decide not to come back next year. You didn't fly halfway around the world for a rock garden and 3 confused parrotfish. And here's the twist. Sharks used to be the villains in a lot of these places. Locals killed them as pests, or for meat and fins. Then shark tourism money showed up. One live reef shark in Palau or the Bahamas can be worth hundreds of thousands of dollars over his lifetime in dive fees, hotel stays, and restaurant tabs. He was savage in the water, but on land he's paying school fees, boat repairs, and mortgages. That cash flipped the script. Communities that once hunted sharks now patrol against poachers, lobby for shark sanctuaries, and treat their sharks like VIP regulars. Just be thankful you didn't have to convince your poor ancestors that the monster in the bay was actually the family business. But if sharks vanish anyway, those operators lose their star attraction overnight. No sharks, no shark dives, fewer fish, no reason to snorkel. Tourists drift to the next country that still has teeth in the water, and small coastal economies start to unravel fast. From your hotel balcony, the ocean still looks perfect. Luckily for us, water doesn't show emptiness from a distance, but slip below the surface and it's a biological ghost town, a quiet, echoing space where a reef used to roar with life. And as if it couldn't get any worse than this, that ghost town doesn't just wreck vacations. It starts feeding back into storms, shorelines, and even the air you breathe. And as if it couldn't get any worse than this, that ghost town doesn't just kill food chains. It starts erasing stories. Because sharks aren't just teeth and cartilage to a lot of people. They're family. In many indigenous Pacific cultures, shark aumakua are guardian ancestors, not movie monsters. In parts of Polynesia, in Fiji, in Hawaii, you don't just see a shark. You might be seeing your great-grandfather checking in on you. You think it's scary to bump into a shark in deep water? Try realizing you just panicked in front of your own ancestors. Along coasts from South Africa to the Torres Strait, sharks show up in origin myths, clan totems, and chief stories. There are dances that copy the swing of a hammerhead's head, chants that describe the exact way a tiger shark circles before he strikes, carvings that match the patterns of real dorsal fins in local bays. Those details aren't random. They come from people watching living animals in their home waters for hundreds of generations. Shark ceremonies only work because the sharks are actually there. A shark calling ritual in parts of Melanesia isn't just theater. It's a practical relationship with a real predator that might rise out of the waves when you sing its name. Oral histories about when sharks show up, where they breed, what they avoid. That's ecological data wrapped in story. Elders aren't just telling scary campfire tales. They're handing you a survival manual in myth form. Now, delete the sharks. The ritual still looks cool for tourists, but the heart's gone. Kids grow up hearing about a guardian they never see, doing a shark dance for an extinct animal. Oh boy. Imagine being told your clan is shark people, when the only shark you've ever met is a faded photo on a classroom wall and a plastic toy at the gift shop. That's not just sad, it's a cultural amputation. Languages lose words for different fins and behaviors. Songs drop verses that no one understands anymore. Fishing knowledge about when to avoid certain reefs or how to read shark movements to find other prey just evaporates. Biodiversity loss isn't only about bodies disappearing. It drags languages, rhythms, and old-school science down with it, one forgotten story at a time. Just be thankful you didn't have to watch your own totem animal vanish in a single lifetime. For many coastal communities, a sharkless ocean isn't just quieter, it's less human. It's a sea stripped of meaning, where the water might still look perfect from your hotel balcony. But for the people who once called the sharks their kin, it's like their entire family tree just swam off the map. And if losing stories sounds soft compared to losing seafood, wait until those broken stories start changing how people treat what's left in the water. Those broken stories don't just change how people treat the ocean, they change what we even think the ocean is for. Fast forward. You walk into a shiny marine park in Tuansuiti 5. There's a massive tank, booming speakers, fog machines, laser lights. The announcer yells, "Get ready to meet the legendary Great White." The crowd screams, phones up, and a perfectly rendered hologram of a shark glides by in crystal clear water with absolutely nothing living in it. You think it's scary to see a fin slice past you on a real beach today? Wait until kids are paying extra for a shark encounter, where the only dangerous thing is the ticket price. No smell of salt, no rush of prey fish, just pixels and hydraulics trying to fake what used to circle every reef for free. Today, the media milks fear. Killer shark. Beach closed. One nip, and it's a week-long news cycle. Oh boy, a 5-foot juvenile bumps a surfboard, and suddenly he's savage, a movie monster. But flip the channel in that future, and the tone is different. Slow piano, grainy footage, a narrator asking, "How did we let this happen?" as they show the last tagged tiger shark disappearing from a tracking map. The same networks that sold you panic over a dorsal fin will be selling you nostalgia packages with titles like "When Oceans Still Had Teeth." Just be thankful you didn't have to watch that shift in real time. Except we kind of are. We do this with predators over and over. Wolves, big cats, giant eagles. Your poor ancestors really wouldn't want to come across. We call them vicious. We wipe them out. And only when they're rare or extinct do we start whispering, "Wow, the ecosystem is falling apart. Maybe we needed them." By the time we're naming sports teams after them and building animatronics, their full ecological role is gone. You can't hire a hologram to control prey populations. So here's where it gets uncomfortably personal. If you had to pick, would you rather feel that jolt of fear when a fin appears in a healthy, living ocean? Or feel nothing at all, standing over a silent, dying one that's safe because everything dangerous is gone? Which version of the story do you actually want to be in? Luckily for us, we are not stuck in the regret montage yet. This isn't one of those extinct animal lists where the credits roll and the monsters are gone forever. Sharks are in trouble. Some are hanging by a thread, as if it couldn't get any worse than this. But the line hasn't snapped. And in the next part, we're flipping the script. If fear and regret wrote the first chapters, what happens when we start writing with power instead? What does it look like when you change the ending while the ocean is still breathing? So let's slam on the brakes for a second. You think it's scary watching the ocean slide toward disaster? Try wrapping your head around this. In some places, they actually hit rewind. Shark comeback stories. Real ones. Take Palau in the Western Pacific. They didn't just protect a reef here or there, they turned their entire exclusive economic zone into one of the world's first shark sanctuaries. Long lines out, finning banned, heavy enforcement. Within years, reef shark numbers climbed, big predators started cruising the drop-offs again, and the food web snapped back into shape. The wild part? Shark tourism now brings in millions every year, way more than killing those same animals ever could. Then you've got the Bahamas, another full-on shark sanctuary. You wouldn't want to come across the water there if you're a poacher. Hammerheads, reef sharks, even tiger sharks started to rebound once the hooks disappeared. Coral cover stabilized, fish diversity shot up, and dive boats lined their decks with people paying good money just to lock eyes with a live, very not extinct apex predator. And it's not just island nations. Fiji's Shark Reef Marine Reserve turned a once heavily fished stretch of water into a protected hotspot. Bull sharks, which had almost vanished, came back in force. Scientists recorded more herbivorous fish, less algae smothering corals, and clearer signs of reef recovery. Local villages swapped some fishing income for shark dives, and the cash from tourists now funds schools and community projects. Luckily for us, when sharks show up, money tends to follow. South Africa banned shark finning. Costa Rica and Honduras set up shark sanctuaries. Countries from the Maldives to French Polynesia restricted catches and leaned into shark tourism instead. Everywhere you see strict rules, time, and actual enforcement, you see the same pattern. Predator returns, mid-level chaos calms down, and the whole system looks less like a horror movie and more like a comeback montage. Even in places that were hammered, nature throws out plot twists. In parts of Australia's Great Barrier Reef, where shark fishing eased off, reef sharks slowly rebounded. With them came more balanced prey populations, fewer runaway outbreaks of coral-eating species, and better odds that those corals keep building the largest living structure on Earth. Your poor ancestors never got to vote on whether their ecosystems recovered. You do. So here's the real twist. The ocean isn't a fragile victim that shatters once and stays broken. It's tough. It's vicious in the best way. Give it breathing room, stop removing the top hunters, and it fights back. From here on out, this video turns into a playbook. We're going to lay out what pushes the ocean toward collapse, what pulls it toward recovery, and exactly how sharks end up being the deciding factor in which future you swim in. So let's talk money, because the ocean might be vicious, but your wallet is even more sensitive. You think it's scary to swim with sharks? Wait until you see the price tag for a world where they're extinct. Right now, the Keep Sharks Alive toolkit is actually pretty simple. You set fishing limits so fleets can't just vacuum up every last fin in the water. You draw lines on a map for marine protected areas where the biggest hunters get to be left alone to do their deadly job. You force boats to use bycatch reduction gear so sharks don't get snagged and drowned while somebody's chasing tuna. And you crack down on illegal finning with patrols, satellite tracking, and penalties that actually hurt. That's it. Boring policy stuff. Not exactly monster movie material, but those boring tools are cheap compared to what comes next if we let sharks vanish. Because when apex predators go, food webs snap. Coral reefs collapse. Seagrass beds die. Fisheries crash. Now you're not paying for a few patrol boats. You're paying for artificial reefs poured out of concrete just to give fish somewhere to hide. You're building coastal defenses, seawalls, breakwaters, beach nourishment, because the reefs that used to blunt storm waves for free are rubble. And it gets worse. Hatcheries to restock lost fish? Those are biological vending machines that never stop eating money. You've got scientists breeding and feeding baby fish in tanks, releasing them, watching half get eaten or starve, then starting again. Disaster recovery after every supercharged storm that slams unprotected coasts? That's billions in rebuilding ports, roads, homes, and tourism infrastructure that used to sit behind healthy reefs and mangroves. Oh boy. Sharks, by comparison, come with the best contract you'll ever see. They regulate prey, cull the weak and sick, keep mid-level predators in check, and protect reefs and seagrass beds just by being terrifying. No salary, no overtime, no maintenance plan. They patrol 24/7, fuel themselves, self-repair, and build more sharks for free. You wouldn't want to come across a big tiger shark in the shallows, but economically, he was savage in the best possible way. So picture a government budget meeting. Option A, spend, say, a few $100 million globally on shark conservation, limits, protected areas, enforcement, better gear, education. Option B, wait, let populations crash, Then pay tens or hundreds of billions when fisheries tank, dive tourism disappears, and storms chew through unprotected coasts. Just be thankful you didn't have to be the politician who said, "Nah, skip the cheap sharks. We'll buy the expensive disasters later." From a cold, spreadsheet-only perspective, keeping sharks alive is one of the best deals humanity will ever get. And we're not done yet, because the economic story is only half of how badly the ocean reacts when you pull out its deadliest guardians. And we're about to prove that with something way scarier than a spreadsheet. Science in action. You think it's scary to see a great white fin slice past your boat? Try being the scientist who decides, "Yeah, I'm gonna jump in and stick a tag on that." Around the world, teams are catching sharks, bringing them alongside boats for a few heart-pounding minutes, and bolting on satellite or acoustic tags that ping every time the animal surfaces or swims past an underwater receiver. Those pings draw migration maps across entire oceans. Hammerheads commuting hundreds of miles between reefs. Tigers bouncing from seagrass beds to shipwrecks like it's a deadly pub crawl. Oceanic whitetips cruising the empty blue where you wouldn't want to come across anything with teeth. These tracks show sharks aren't just local bullies. They're the highways that connect coral reefs, seamounts, and coasts into one giant living system. Then there's the spy gear. Underwater cameras and baited remote systems get dropped to the seafloor like little robot filmmakers. No divers, no bubbles. Just a chunk of bait, a camera, and pure, uncensored shark behavior. Scientists replay the footage to count how many sharks show up, what species, who dominates the buffet, and how often they return year after year. Add acoustic arrays to that mix. Long lines of hidden underwater microphones listening for tagged sharks. When a shark cruises by, the array logs the exact time and place. Over a decade, you don't just get a snapshot, you get a biography. Where he hunts, where he rests, when he vanishes. If a once busy corridor suddenly goes quiet, that's not a vibe shift. That's a population crash. Oh boy. And then come the comparisons. Shark-rich reefs versus shark-poor reefs. Same water, same sunlight, totally different worlds. On healthy, shark-heavy reefs, you see big, wary fish, thick schools of herbivores mowing algae, coral growing like a living city. In places where sharks are gone or nearly extinct, mid-level predators explode, wipe out the plant eaters, algae smothers the coral, and the whole thing starts looking like a slimy rock graveyard. These aren't horror stories somebody made up to make sharks sound noble. They're built from decades of tagging data, camera footage, dive surveys, fisheries records, and a lot of scientists getting tossed around in rough seas. Luckily for us, the warnings you're hearing aren't based on fear-mongering. They're based on fieldwork. From people who've watched the ocean change in real time. So now that you know the numbers, the videos, and the tracking lines, all point the same way. What do you even do with that? Just sit there feeling small, sad, and slightly afraid of both sharks and spreadsheets? Or is there actually something you can change, starting way up here on land? You think it's scary to swim with sharks? Try picturing the ocean without them. Because when sharks disappear, it's not just a few dangerous fish gone from your nightmares. The whole system starts glitching. Top predators vanish, mid-level hunters explode, herbivores crash, and you get unstable food webs that swing from boom to bust like a broken stock market. Coral reefs lose their bodyguards, algae smothers them, seagrass meadows get chewed to mud, and entire coastlines lose that living armor that used to break the waves. And as if it couldn't get any worse than this, your dinner plate gets dragged into it. No sharks means more rays and mid-level predators hammering shellfish and small fish. That's how you go from grilled scallops tonight to guess we're eating mystery fish sticks forever. Fisheries can and do collapse when that balance snaps. Those oxygen-making plankton factories we talked about? They depend on healthy, layered food webs. Break the top, and you don't just lose seafood, you mess with one of the largest life support systems for the air you breathe. So yeah, this is about what ends up on your fork. But it's also about where you go to relax. That postcard perfect reef you want to snorkel on your next vacation? Without sharks, it can flip into a slimy brown rubble field no resort wants in their brochure. Shark-based ecotourism alone is worth millions per reef in some places. Lose the sharks, and those local jobs, dive shops, and tour boats vanish right along with them. And then your wallet gets hit from a direction you really wouldn't want to come across. Weaker reefs and dying seagrass mean less natural coastal protection, bigger storm surges, nastier flooding, more erosion. That can mean higher insurance premiums, higher taxes for seawalls, or just higher odds that the next big storm doesn't politely stop at the beach. You think sharks are deadly? Try a hurricane slamming into a coast with no living buffer. This isn't a cute "Save the Animals" poster. This is a "Save the Systems that Save Us" emergency. Sharks keep prey, populations healthy, recycle nutrients, and keep the ocean from turning into a biological ghost town with nice views. Luckily for us, they've been doing this job for hundreds of millions of years. We're the new, slightly clumsy interns who just showed up and started unplugging things. So knowing all this, where do you fit? Are your choices nudging sharks closer to being just another extinct apex predator our poor ancestors never met? Or helping pull them back from the edge? Oh boy. In the next part, we're going to break down exactly what you can do from dry land. No guilt trips, no sell your house and live on a raft. Just real concrete moves that actually shift the odds for sharks. And for you. So let's hit pause on the doom for a second and flip the script. You think it's scary to swim with sharks? For decades, the real horror movie was what we did to them, and nobody even stayed for the credits. For a long time, sharks were basically public enemy number one. Jaws didn't just sell tickets, it sold fear. One mechanical great white turned the whole ocean into a haunted house. Suddenly, every dorsal fin was a movie monster, every bite was a headline, and every dead shark was treated like justice served. You could haul in the largest hammerhead on a pier, smile for the camera, and the crowd would cheer instead of cringe. That fear gave cover for some very real, very deadly behavior. Finning boats sliced off fins and dumped still-living sharks back into the water, and most people never even heard about it. Politicians weren't exactly racing to protect an animal everyone thought was a mindless man-eater. Why defend the villain, right? But here's the plot twist. The cameras turned around. New documentaries started following sharks without the horror soundtrack, showing mothers guarding pups, individuals with personalities, even long-term social groups. Social media jumped in too. One GoPro clip of a diver calmly swimming alongside a massive tiger shark can do more to melt fear than 100 cheesy attack scenes. You see a researcher gently redirect a curious great white with a hand on the nose, and suddenly, he's not a movie monster. He was savage, sure, but he's also curious, cautious, and vital. Luckily for us, public opinion isn't just vibes, it's leverage. When enough people decide sharks are worth more alive than dead, things move. Governments start banning finning because voters won't tolerate it. Marine reserves get drawn on maps because tourism boards realize a live reef shark is a recurring paycheck, not a one-time trophy. Research and enforcement suddenly look like smart investments instead of charity for a dangerous fish. And this isn't theory. In places like Fiji, parts of the Bahamas, and the Pacific coast of Mexico, former shark hunters now run shark dives. Same boats, different mission. They figured out you wouldn't want to come across a reef with no sharks and no tourists. A single friendly-looking reef shark, visited by divers year after year, can be worth tens of thousands of dollars every season to local communities. Kill him once, and the money stream is extinct. So where do you fit in this reboot? You're not just a passive viewer eating popcorn while the ocean gets edited. Every time you share a shark clip that shows beauty instead of blood, support a brand that skips shark products, or back policies that protect apex predators, you're voting for the version of the story where sharks recover. Oh boy, in the next part, we'll turn that big cultural shift into a personal game plan. Exactly how you, from your couch, can push the needle where it actually counts. So let's turn this into power moves, not panic. You think it's scary to swim with sharks? Try realizing you're already swimming in the same economy that decides if they go extinct or not. Every time you buy lunch, book a trip, or hit share on a post. First battlefield, your plate. Most people never see a shark die. They just see seafood special on a menu. A lot of those specials come from massive industrial fleets where sharks are the accidental prey, hauled up as bycatch, finned, or dumped. You don't need a marine biology degree here. You just need to get annoying in the best way. Ask, is this from a sustainable fishery? Check apps and guides that rate seafood. If they can't tell you where it came from, that mystery fish might be hiding a very real shark problem. Second move, where you point your vacation money. Shark-based ecotourism on a single reef can bring in millions every year, way more than killing those same animals ever could. When you choose operators that follow strict codes, no bait and slaughter, no sketchy cages, just respectful encounters and healthy reefs, you're literally paying people to keep sharks alive. You wouldn't want to come across a boat that dumps scraps just to get a crazy selfie, then trashes the habitat. Support the crews that treat sharks like the VIP apex predators they are. Third, the boring-sounding stuff that secretly hits like a megalodon bite. Laws. A lot of countries still allow shark fin imports or sales through tiny loopholes, as if it couldn't get any worse than this for enforcement. 2 clicks and you can find out if yours is one of them. If it is, that's your cue. Sign the petitions, back the campaigns, email the reps. It feels small, but when tens of thousands of small emails land in an inbox, suddenly that loophole looks very dangerous to the person who has to get re-elected. Then there's the thing you carry everywhere, your voice, online and in real life. When someone says, sharks are just mindless killers, you can drop a calm, deadly accurate fact bomb. Over 30% of shark and ray species are threatened, and losing them can snap entire food webs. Luckily for us, sharing a video of sharks cruising peacefully over a reef, or correcting a myth in the comments, is way easier than wrestling a ray off a seagrass bed. Oh boy, you might feel like one tiny fish in a huge ocean, but markets and politicians chase schools, not loners. Your choices signal where the school is going. Up next, we'll stack these moves into a simple, step-by-step game plan, so you know exactly what to do this week, this month, and this year to keep sharks in the water and off the extinction list. So if you don't want sharks to go extinct on your watch, you can't just quietly recycle a water bottle and hope for the best. You need backup. Big backup. That's where the front lines come in. There are shark and ocean conservation groups whose entire job is to keep fins attached to bodies and predators in the water, not in soup bowls. You think it's scary to swim without a lifeguard? Imagine the whole ocean trying to survive without them. Look for the reputable crews first. The ones doing hard science, not just posting pretty beach pics. They run tagging programs that track where the largest sharks go, how deep they dive, when they breed. Every tag, every satellite ping, is ammo in policy fights, because you can't argue with a great white's GPS trail. Donations and memberships are what literally buy those tags, pay the boat fuel, and keep researchers out there instead of stuck begging for grants. Then you've got the people who patrol the water. In some hotspots, conservation groups help fund anti-finning patrols and train local rangers, so a shark finning boat is way more likely to meet a Coast Guard than a payday. Your $20 might not look deadly, but bundled with thousands of others, it turns into fuel, binoculars, and busted illegal nets. And it's not all high seas drama. A lot of this fight happens in classrooms and village halls. Community education programs show fishers why keeping sharks alive protects their own prey species and their kids' future income. They teach tourists that a living shark is worth way more as a dive attraction than as a bowl of soup. Luckily for us, that kind of math is pretty convincing once people actually see the numbers. Zoom out, and the legal battlefield gets even bigger. There are international agreements that limit shark fin trade, ban certain gear, and set rules for migratory species. National laws create shark sanctuaries and hammer poachers with fines. Those don't appear by magic. They show up because citizens email, sign, march, vote, and refuse to shut up. As if it couldn't get any worse than this, politicians notice silence way less than noise. So pay attention close to home. Coastal development plans, new fishing regulations, marine protected areas popping up in the news. That's your arena. You wouldn't want to come across a reef stripped bare because nobody bothered to read page 3 of a zoning notice. Because all of this pressure, all of this muscle, is pushing toward one picture, an ocean where sharks are everywhere they're supposed to be, doing the deadly, beautiful work they've ever done best. Next, let's pull that picture into focus and imagine what a world with thriving sharks and thriving seas wrapped around your planet really looks like. So picture this: same ocean, same planet, totally different ending. You think it's scary to imagine a silent, sharkless sea? Flip the script. Imagine dropping into warm blue water and the reef underneath you is buzzing like a city at rush hour. Schools of parrotfish mowing algae, clouds of tiny damselfish flashing like confetti, corals lit up in neon. And above all that traffic, a gray reef shark cruises past like a calm patrol car, and every fish instantly remembers its manners. This isn't some fantasy game map. Reefs that still have their full cast of predators are already doing this. In places with shark sanctuaries, those dangerous silhouettes overhead mean the food web is locked in, top to bottom. Herbivores keep the algae in check, corals hold the line, and coastal communities cash in on dive boats and sustainable catches instead of racing each other to the last fish. You get fishermen landing fewer, larger, higher value fish instead of scraping the bottom for scraps. Now swim inshore. The water turns shallow and green, and you glide over seagrass meadows that look like underwater wheat fields. Juvenile fish dart between the blades, baby sharks ghost along the edges, and big predators swing through just enough to keep everyone jumpy. Those meadows grab carbon out of the water and bury it, quietly doing climate work your poor ancestors never even dreamed about. Behind them, mangrove forests tangle along the coast, roots packed with crabs, snappers, rays, and all the weird, wiggly prey you wouldn't want to come across barefoot. When storms hit, those same mangroves and seagrass beds act like a living shield, taking punch after punch from waves so the town behind them doesn't. That's not just nice nature. That's fewer flooded houses, fewer shattered roads, fewer kids doing homework by flashlight for a month. And speaking of kids, in this version of the story, they grow up seeing sharks for real, not just as jump scare music on a screen. They stand on a boat in Fiji or the Bahamas and watch a tiger shark glide past, and instead of screaming, they're counting fin tips and asking the guide how old he is, what he eats, why he matters. Luckily for us, we already know it works like this. Shark tourism hotspots are worth millions every year, and those same boats fund rangers, research, and local jobs. You think all of that sounds too good? It's already happening. Countries have drawn giant shark sanctuaries on the map. Dozens have banned finning or fin trade. Some once-hammered populations are creeping back where fishing rules got serious. The recovery story isn't magic. It's policy, patience, and people deciding sharks are worth more alive than extinct. So here's the real twist. Both endings are on the table right now. The collapse story and the recovery story. Next, we're going to hand you the pen and show you exactly how you help write the one where sharks still rule the deep. So now that we've seen both endings on the table, let's zoom out and remember why losing sharks doesn't just mean fewer scary teeth in the water. You think it's scary to bump into a big fin while you're swimming? The real horror movie is an ocean where that fin is gone. Sharks aren't just apex predators, they're apex regulators. They patrol the top of the food web, stalking the bold, the sick, and the sloppy. By scaring large prey into moving and culling the weakest, they keep everything underneath from exploding into chaos. They're ecosystem engineers too, shaping where turtles graze, where fish school, and where seals dare to haul out. And they don't clock out when the hunt is over. Sharks are scavengers, stripping carcasses before they rot and spread disease. They're nutrient movers, hauling energy from the deep to the shallows and back again every time they migrate, feed, and, well, poop. It's not glamorous, but it's how reefs stay colorful, seagrass stays lush, and plankton factories keep cranking out the oxygen you breathe. Rip sharks out of that system, and the chain reaction is vicious. Trophic cascades kick in. Mid-level predators boom, herbivores crash, algae smothers coral, and reefs flip from neon cities to gray rubble. Seagrass meadows get overgrazed or abandoned, so they stop locking away carbon and start bleeding it back into the atmosphere, nudging climate stress up another deadly notch. We've already watched it happen. In places where big sharks vanished, rays exploded and chewed through scallop beds until fisheries collapsed. Reef sharks disappeared, mid-level hunters spiked, and herbivorous fish got hammered, giving algae a free pass to take over. As if it couldn't get any worse than this, those same weakened coasts become sitting ducks for storms and erosion, because reefs and seagrass aren't there to blunt the hit. So sharks aren't optional extras. They're not the jump scare cameo in the ocean movie. They're the structural beams in the whole set. Pull them out, and the architecture of marine life, and a lot of human well-being hanging off it, starts to sag, crack, and finally snap. Your seafood, your coastal protection, even part of your climate safety net is riding on those fins. And this isn't some distant sci-fi sharkless future. Over 30% of shark and ray species are already threatened with extinction. In some places, the largest sharks have dropped by more than 90% in just a few decades. Just be thankful you didn't have to watch that decline in real time from a fishing boat, because he was savage, fast, quiet, and mostly legal. Luckily for us, we've also seen that when we back off, some shark populations roar back. So next, we're going to flip the script one more time and show you exactly how you, personally, help decide which ending the oceans get. So now it's your turn. You think it's scary to swim with a shark somewhere out in the blue? Decide which ending you're actually more afraid of. Being part of the generation that watched sharks vanish, or the one that pulled them back from the edge. That's not a poetic question. That's a literal fork in the timeline you're living in right now. Over 30% of shark and ray species are already threatened with extinction. If we keep coasting, we become the people future documentaries talk about with that disappointed voiceover. Your poor ancestors let the ocean's top predators disappear, and everything crashed behind them. Oh boy. So here's what I want you to do, the second this video ends. Pause your autoplay brain, open a new tab, and check one thing. Does your country still allow shark fin imports or sales? Just type shark fin trade, plus where you live. If the answer is yes, that's your first mission. Share what you find, and then drop one concrete action you're going to take in the comments. Maybe it's emailing a representative, signing a petition, or just posting the stats that nobody at your dinner table has ever heard. Because the old story about sharks has been running your whole life. Jaws, killer headlines, clickbait every time one accidentally bites a surfboard. We've had decades of fear-based storytelling. It's time to flood the feed with shark-positive narratives. Hit subscribe so you don't miss the rest of this ocean series. Share this video with the one friend who still thinks every fin is out to get him. And be the annoying person who corrects mindless killer at parties. Luckily for us, you don't have to wrestle a great white to make a difference. Support real shark conservation groups that are out there tagging, tracking, and fighting finning bans. When you buy seafood, look for sustainable labels or apps that tell you which choices don't strip the ocean of its predators along with its prey. Booking a trip? Choose shark-friendly tourism that leaves fins attached and focuses on respectful encounters, not baited circus shows you wouldn't want to come across in some sketchy harbor. Every tiny decision stacks. Every share. Every sub. Every time you speak up when someone repeats the "good shark is a dead shark" line. You're nudging the story in one direction or the other. So as you're about to click away, remember this. Your next click, your next purchase, your next casual conversation about dangerous animals is either another tug on the noose around the ocean's top predators, or one more hand pulling them back, along with everything that still depends on them, including you. So as you're about to click away, remember this. Your next click, your next purchase, your next casual conversation about dangerous animals is either another tug on the noose around the ocean's top predators, or one more hand pulling them back, along with everything that still depends on them, including you. You think it's scary to see that fin slice through the surface while you're swimming? Roll the tape back to the very first image in your head, that triangle of doom, cutting the water like a knife. Now flip it. The real horror story is the same ocean, the same waves, the same beach, and that fin never shows up again. Calm on top, deadly quiet underneath. Picture the closing shot. Deep blue. No music, just a low, distant rumble of water and your own heartbeat in your ears. A single shark glides into frame, huge but effortless, muscles barely moving as he patrols a reef that's very much alive. Fish scatter and regroup. Corals sway. Rays cruise the sand. Nobody panics. They just give the king his space, because you wouldn't want to come across the actual boss of the food chain and forget your manners. Then, with one slow flick of the tail, he drifts away into the blue and disappears, not as a movie monster, but as a security guard ending his shift, the last line of defense you never meet, but always need. That's the paradox we live with. The creatures we call vicious, the ones posters and headlines turn into villains, might be the only reason the ocean still works at all. Sharks thin out the sick and the weak, keep those mid-level predators from exploding, keep seagrass beds and coral reefs from collapsing like a Jenga tower in slow motion. Luckily for us, they've been doing that job for hundreds of millions of years without sending us an invoice. So when someone jokes about good riddance, if sharks went extinct, you've got a new image to throw back. Not a bloody movie scene, but a crystal clear bay with no life, no color, no motion. A biological ghost town that looks safe for you, because everything that made it dangerous and beautiful is gone. Carry that last shot with you. That lone shark fading into the blue, not hunting you, but hunting for you. The monster that quietly keeps your seafood, your reefs, even a chunk of the oxygen you breathe, in working order. Just be thankful you didn't have to deal with Megalodon, because as if it couldn't get any worse than this, that guy really would have rewritten beach season. As long as that fin still cuts the water somewhere out there, there's still time. Time to vote, to speak up, to spend money in ways that protect, not destroy. Time to keep sharks ruling parts of the deep, so the ocean, and everything that ever crawled out of it, including you, gets to keep living. So, next time you see that fin, maybe don't just feel fear. Feel responsibility.